Morning, everyone. I am Bobby Spiegel. I'm the president and CEO for the Corona Chamber, and I'm just honored and privileged that each and every one of you are plugging in either live with us right now or viewing this for another time. We have a jam-packed agenda, and I'm so excited to be able to introduce our chair of our Legislative Action Committee. For those that aren't aware, Jeff Miller is a former state assembly member. He served the town of Corona and other communities. And what I loved about Jeff was because he was a business owner and remains being a business owner, he totally understands how difficult it is for each and every one of you and for us to operate on a daily basis. He also has the understanding that you have to be able to work with other personalities and other ideas. And he was very successful in working on both sides of the aisle to ensure good business legislation was passed. With that being said, Jeff has been a former city mayor for the city of Corona, and he's been very involved in numerous nonprofits. Please welcome our chair for 2022 for legislative action, Mr. Jeff Miller. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Well, I'm excited to be the 2022 chair for the Legislative Action Committee. We are very excited to have you joining us today. We are beginning the process of the first part of the year where we are tracking legislation that's coming through Sacramento's committees. And we will be starting our process really today of going through a few bills that are already been submitted. And Jeff's going to walk us through the pertinent details of them. Before we get started, I would like to thank our event sponsor, which is Norco College. Norco College is a 2-year public institution of higher education, one of 3 colleges in the Riverside Community College District. They offer over 80 majors, including certificates, degrees, industry credentials, and short-term certificates. Thank you, Norco College, for sponsoring our meeting today. As a reminder, you can use the chat button on the bottom center of your screen. If you want to send any questions in, you can feel free to just use that chat button and send them into the chamber host, and we'll make sure they get asked to the appropriate person at that time. With that, I would like to introduce Stephanie Extraordinaire Shapiro, the Vice President of Communications and Events, to give a few updates.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. I appreciate your time today, and we're looking forward to a great 2022. We'll see how we can make it even better with our advocacy efforts this year. I do have a few updates for you. A couple of weeks ago, I had announced that the 2022 edition of Corona the Guide and Business Directory was online as of the first of the year. We have them in our hands now. You can't see them. This dang background. Well, okay. We have copies here at the office. They've been mailed out to every one of our members along with a 2022 labor law poster. And we have additional available here at the office for pickup. If you would like to be a hub for distribution, if you have an office or a business where there's a lot of clients coming in and out of there and you would like extras for your facilities, please let us know and we'll make sure to arrange to get those for you. It tells the story of Corona, of our businesses here, and also has a handy guide for anything that you may be looking for. So we encourage you to look at it and use it often. Next, I'd like to invite you to a free program that the city and the chamber are co-hosting about the downtown revitalization here in the city of Corona. This has been a topic of discussion for several years now, and we are actually on track to make something really big happen. And so now's the time for our businesses and those who are directly affected by this to come and say their opinions. Let them know how it will affect you, what you'd like to see there. We're actually going to be breaking up into small tables and and having discussions that go back to the agencies that are putting these plans together. So it's critical. We would love to have as many of you there represented as possible, because this is our future. So your opinions matter, and we would love for you to be there. Pre-registration is required, and it's coming up on the 25th of this month. The last event I wanted to just bring to your attention today is Good Morning Corona. We will be having that not this week, but next Friday on January 28th. Our guest speaker will be Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin. You can see on the screen here, there's a link where you can get your registration if you're interested in attending. There is early pricing through this Friday, and Anthony will put that in the chat as well. We'd like to thank our sponsors so far, Medcare Farms, Off the Charts, Velvet, and Vulcan Materials Company. There's room for more if you'd like to get some exposure for your business, you would like to have an exhibitor table, or of course, there are just great networking opportunities at this event that we have 10 months out of the year. We hope to see you to kick off a good 2022. And before I turn it back over to Jeff, I just wanted to remind you that our team is here for our members. We want you to make the most out of your membership, not only with benefits that the Chamber has to offer, but in collaboration, issues that come up. The relationship is the most important part, right? So we have here, you see on your screen, Robert Yanes. He is our membership coordinator. He can help you get the most out of your membership benefits. He can help tell you about different incentives that are coming up. If you have a business associate you'd like to introduce to the Chamber, we would appreciate that introduction. And then if you have any questions or you're wondering what opportunities exist to get your name out there, you can definitely see Robert or see Tammy. She's another member of our sales and marketing team here, and she can tell you all about advertising opportunities, sponsorships, all the great events that are coming up. And we just encourage you to get in touch and let's be friends. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jeff.
Stephanie. Okay, before we get into the meat of the matter, I'd like to introduce Jeff Gibson. Jeff is the owner of Occidental Communications Group. He's had 4 decades of experience working on the 91 freeway, the 15 freeway, projects like Jessica's Law and endangered species and water conservation. He brings extensive knowledge to complex political issues, and I'd like to introduce Jeff Gibson.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. We are off and running for the first full week of committee hearings in Sacramento. Wednesday oftentimes is a big day for committees to hear legislation. We have a bill to discuss and a proposed regulation that will have a great deal of effect on just about everybody on this phone call. Whether you are a manufacturer or a consumer, which kind of takes up 2 different groups. And we also have breaking news that Great Britain has suspended all restrictions related to COVID immediately for their at-home work order. And as of January 27th, they're going to be removing all restrictions. So that makes 6 different countries in the EU or thereabouts that have removed their COVID restrictions. So hopefully there's more news on that. And that includes masks. So masks will no longer be required. Travel restrictions, all of those things are being lifted completely in Great Britain immediately. So in any case, you may want to look into that. But looking on to our issues locally, we are still dealing with AB 257, which is kind of defying the laws of physics and the legislature by even still being a law that can be heard. Its author, former Assembly member Lorena Gonzalez, over the holidays resigned from the legislature to take a position helping lead the General Labor Council of the state of California. We have opposed. I believe we have never supported one of her pieces of legislation that we were interested in one, and then she amended it to make sure that employers understood that they were not welcome. If you remember when Elon Musk was providing 10,000 ventilators to the state of California, she was the one that famously tweeted out F Elon Musk, and based on that, he decided it was time for him to be leaving California. So, which cost the state of California about 100,000 jobs. But in any case, her AB 257 is designed to essentially eliminate the ability of the legislature to control minimum wage laws and eliminate the ability of franchise restaurants to organize themselves around a central model. So the stated goal is to roll back the ability of franchisees altogether, because the author does not believe in the franchise model. She believes that it's an end run around government regulation, even though it's been in existence for approximately 450 years, starting with the Bass Brewing Company in England. But be that as it may, that was her opinion. There's a steadfast rule in the legislature, and Jeff Miller can correct me if I'm wrong, that a piece of legislation must have an author in order to be considered. This bill does not have an author, and yet it is being heard in the legislature this week. It was stalled because of the radical character, and so let's jump into it. So it's AB 257. You will likely hear in the press and in other literature that you may be seeing that this is dealing with fast food restaurants. It is not dealing with just fast food restaurants. It's dealing with nearly every restaurant that has any sort of component which would be considered a quick serve type restaurant and has more than 30 different branded components to it. So you can have 7 restaurants, but if you have 30 branded components, then you are no longer a franchised restaurant like a Chipotle, like a McDonald's. You are now falling underneath this bill, whether you intend to or not. What it will do is it transfers the authority over imposing workplace rules from the legislature and the administration to an appointed state council. And then underneath that state wage council would be a wage council for every single county. It is not clear exactly who would appoint those 11 members within a county. And then beneath that, any area that has, any city that has more than 200,000 people living in it would then have their own local council. So you could own a business that pays minimum wage and fall under state requirements, state wage council requirements, your county wage council requirements, and if the city that you decided to locate in is has over 200,000 people in it, then you would fall under local requirements as well. There's a very good reason why we do not adopt this system in the United States. In foreign countries, in almost every language in the world, these are called Soviets. I am not joking. That's what the Soviet Union specifically was. You had a local council, a regional council, a state council, and then a national council, all of which were appointed by people that were supposedly elected. So we have never adopted that system. There's a very good reason why we haven't adopted that system, because we adopted the legislative system. The legislative system means that people like Jeff Miller, when he was in the Assembly, people like Senator Roth, who his representatives on the phone with us right now, are responsible to the people who elected them. And they decide, and as we know, there was a very difficult minimum wage bill that came up several years ago. Senator Roth voted for it, but he was very active with us in explaining why. and what he was trying to do with that. We appreciated that despite the difference of opinion, we respected each other and were able to work through that. Personally, that was something that I considered was a good mark for the senator. What this does is it turns that legislative tradition completely on its head. And by the way, the author, when asked about this, stated clearly that that was her intent, was to put minimum wage within the control of the people who are making the minimum wage. So you can see that's runs counter to a lot of the interests that we have. And so and it creates a number of different legal problems. So, but it is up for hearing because it was far enough along in the legislative process that the committee that it will be up in, I believe it's up in appropriations, will hear it. It could kill it at that point, but it is still moving. And so we need to take it. We have taken an opposed position and are working with the California Chamber of Commerce and others to defeat the bill. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
There are no questions at the moment, Jeff.
All right, stunned you into silence. It was the Soviet line, I bet. And for anybody who was born after the Berlin Wall fell, you can Google it, as the president likes to say when people ask him questions about his home policy. You can Google it. On to the next great separation of powers issue in California. Our second slide here is Prop 65 has decided bravely not only to never appoint anyone who has a degree in science to their agency board. So in order to develop what are toxic chemicals. The second thing they're now doing is they're now trying openly to defy a court ruling that was very specific and said, essentially, if this is such a big deal in the state of California, then the administration cannot on its own decide to implement this. It needs legislation to do so. Over the last 4 years, so over the last 4 years, the administration has looked at that court ruling, obviously, and according to what it wrote in January of 2021, did not appreciate having the court decide that there are two different types of Prop 65 toxic materials notifications. One is called the short form, and one is called the long form. Anybody that walks into any building in the state of California, anybody that drinks any water like Anthony just did, or goes to the beach, or if you go to the beach now, you'll see a Prop 65 warning because they're trace elements of mercury and other items that taken in mass have radioactivity to them or are chemically bad for the body. But we have to put Prop 65 warnings on every single thing that we do here in California. Well, there is a short form, which is basically a summary card that is no smaller than 5 inches that says warning on it. Everybody gets it when you open your gifts for your birthday or Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's or whenever you would receive a gift, and you're told that your brand new sweater also contains carcinogens. And if you have a question about that, you can go to a website. That is as a result of a court ruling in 2017 saying that the legislation that created Prop 65, including Prop 65, did not give the administration the authority to mandate precisely what size and form are taken. So there's a short form and a long form. It basically widened the ability for people to use what is known as the short form. It's still a very specific I'm sure everyone has seen them. It says Prop 65 warning, has to be in block letters. The block letters have to be 3 times the size of the text, on and on and on. Well, the state is now trying to roll back the requirements on a short form so that you would almost never qualify for a short form. You would have to have a long form, which would have to be at least 12 inches long, could be up to, so it's not the size of a normal sheet of paper. You'd have to go out and buy custom sized paper. It could be retroactive. So if you are selling goods, say at Costco, you would have to go pay someone to go open up all of your packaging at Costco and put in this form. It would have to maintain almost all of the chemicals that were used in your manufacturing process. And many times, as manufacturers on this line can say, you use sub vendors for material as it's available. So you might get various different, you get the same screws, you get the same strings, you get the same paint, but the process may end up having different chemicals in it. Well, if you have a form in your product that specifically lists every single ingredient in it, and there's a deficiency, then obviously you have a legal liability. And that's really what this is about, or creating legal liabilities. In addition, the Prop 65 Commission has been roundly rejected by the courts in putting a long form requirement on the sale of all agricultural goods in the state of California. So you can imagine that if you went into your Costco or your Vons and decided to buy a steak, having to also show at checkout your 2-page booklet on verifying what every single chemical that is in the food that you are about to buy. That is the plan for the state of California, that every time you buy any sort of agricultural goods, you are going to get a long form for each of those specific goods. So if you buy 25 to 50 goods at a Costco or Trader Joe's or Vons or wherever, and please always bring your own bag. You won't get any bags anymore, but you will get up to 50 pages of disclosures and perhaps even more if this is passed. So obviously this is something that a number of businesses are very upset about. It was introduced in the middle of the pandemic shutdowns in January of last year. There have been comments that have been flooding in. We are going to add our voice to those comments, obviously, and over the next couple of days. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anthony, are there any questions yet?
Yes, we actually do have one question.
Sure.
Is this back and forth between the courts and the legislature why so many things in California become constitutional amendments? So that would be the first part of the question, and then I believe there is a second part as well. So if you want to answer that first part.
Well, so why don't you read the whole thing, and we'll fillet it up
Rather than
without
strictly
a Prop 65 warning.
Yeah. So rather than strictly opposing this bill, could we take a position to provide this information online with a QR code? I understand the additional overhead. This is why an information source might be helpful.
So sure, we could provide additional information always. That's fine. You can find this online literally by going just Prop 65 new rule and find the reporting as well. So to your first question, the problem that ends up happening here is that the regulation comes from the legislation. And so with the separation of powers that we have and the checks and balances, regulators quite often find themselves either threatened or bumping up against legal requirements, which they know the legislature did not consider or considered what you're attempting to do, and decided that they did not want to include that in what's known as the legislative history. So there actually aren't that many constitutional amendments. There are more constitutional amendments to the state constitution than there are to the federal constitution. But given that we've been living under the same constitution since 1872, there really aren't that many that are implemented each and every 2 years. But yes, in many cases, Prop 65 was created by a ballot initiative, which is why it's called Prop 65. But if that answers your question.
Thank you, Jeff. And with that, there are no further questions.
All right.
Jeff, I just want to go back to when you were talking on 257. You had indicated, Elon Musk leaving California. I think it's important to point out that, there's a domino effect when stuff like that happens. Affiliates, businesses or affiliates, just as a minimum. And I think it's important to point out, this is why the chamber's here. This is why we're here, to advocate, to look at these things and have an opinion about them. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything onto that or not, but
sure. So
yes.
So when Toyota left for Tennessee and took 27,000 jobs with them and approximately 200,000 jobs in the automotive industry out of the South Bay, the thing that we heard of quite a bit was the idea of Silicon Beach. And that became literally the almost 100% of the growth goal for the county of Los Angeles over the next 10 years was an idea called Silicon Beach. It was going to run from El Segundo all the way up to Ventura. And it was basically going to be the next Silicon Valley. And 100% of that was based on space travel and electric cars and solar energy. And basically centered around 3 companies. Solar City for solar energy, founded and owned by Elon Musk. Tesla, founded and owned by Elon Musk. And SpaceX, founded and owned by Elon Musk. There is a very rich history in California, especially in the Hawthorne, El Segundo, South Bay area, running down into Huntington Beach, of aerospace and specifically space, and a huge amount of those areas. Downey still calls itself the Apollo City because that's where the Apollo program is actually headquartered. So when Elon Musk decided to leave, that honestly took 100% of the stated Los Angeles County net positive economic plan with him when he left. And that has not been replaced. So there is a huge follow-on effect, especially for some of these folks. So it is something that we're tracking, and we need to work why chambers are so vital. On AB 257 specifically, several different members of the legislature who are going to be hearing on the legislation over the next couple of days have said they need to hear that they've heard all they need to hear from unions who are interested in creating these councils, but they have not heard from small business owners, and that's really where it comes from with the chambers, which is why we moved it forward, and we actually bumped back the largest state tax increase in the United States history, which we'll talk about next week, because this part is so vital, specifically to the issue of the legislature giving authority to raise minimum wage to an unappointed body. So that's just not what we hope for. Whatever party you are, you always want to be able to call Senator Roth or Assemblymember Cervantes and say, I have a concern about this piece of legislation, and you don't want them to have to turn around and say, well, I don't have anything to do with that because that's an unappointed council. or it's an appointed council. So anyway, if that helps or belabors the point, I'm not sure.
Oh no, that's great. I just think, when we talk to businesses that have left the state of California, their excuse really is it's a death of 1,000 cuts between local and state regulations. It's a death of 1,000 cuts, and so you'll hear that common theme as you talk to these businesses that are leaving. Okay, let's continue.
I'm done. That's all I've got for today.
You're
That's all the
done.
good news I have for today.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jeff.
COVID is
Anthony,
ending.
are there any
According to government agencies.
new
So,
questions that came in?
There are no new questions.
No new questions. Okay. Sometimes I like going off the agenda. I want to thank, the nonprofits in our town are so vitally important to our community. And I want to thank Peppermint Ridge for jumping on the call. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. And Jim waved. With that, as Jeff mentioned, our Assembly Member Sabrina Cervantes and our Senator Richard Roth. Information is up on the screen, and feel free to reach out to them. And if you want some sample letters that we can provide you, if you'd like to use a sampling template, we can provide those to you also. Just let the chamber know that you're interested on any of these bills. Before we end today's call, I'd just like to recognize a few other people on the call. One of my favorite city council members here in the city of Corona, retired, Yolanda Carrillo. Thank you, Yolanda, for coming on the call. We also have Virginia Blumenthal. Thank you, Virginia, for joining us. Virginia is a trustee of the Riverside Community College District, and she's done that for many years. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Annette Dumont from the Riverside County Office of Education. Thank you for joining the call, as well as Ashley Zaragoza from the city of Corona, who is with the Office of Economic Development. So I hope I didn't miss anybody. Bobby, if there's anyone.
Yeah, I'd like to just do a shout out. Our sponsor happens to be on Dr. Monica Green with Norco College, and we always appreciate their support for us.
We also had Tim Gramling, Dr. Tim Gramling, who's the Dean of the School of Business at California Baptist University. Thank you. So with that, we'd just like to thank Norco College for sponsoring. They serve over 16,000 students and have been named a top institution for veterans. You can learn more at norcocollege.edu. If you would like to sponsor a briefing, there will be a slide coming up. Please contact the chamber, and we'd be happy to have you be a sponsor. Please join us next week, January 26th, and we'll bring you updates on these and any additional legislation that's moving through the process that you should be aware of. Thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call.